Bienvenidos a la ZONA Podcast, el espacio donde el conocimiento, el deporte y la tecnología se fusionan para inspirarte. Voces expertas, historias cautivadoras y análisis profundo te esperan en cada episodio. Prepárate para sumergirte en la zona.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon, or at whatever time you're listening to this podcast. This is La ZONA Podcast. This is our first interview in English, and well, it's a big welcome to all the community that listens to us in the United States, in Canada, in the United Kingdom, wherever you are, in Australia, South Africa, or just anywhere in the world where you can hear this content and you can just learn about soccer, learn about people who are talking about soccer, hear testimonies of people who have been involved with soccer, and just to hear more about one of the most beautiful sports in this world. Today, it is a special honor to say hello to Alex Sundley. Well, he is the assistant coach at Cal University, and which is one of the most important universities in the United States. So, Alec, welcome to La Zona Podcast.
Perfect, right on. Thank you, David, for having me, and to the whole La Zona community. I'm really excited to be here.
Thank you, man. Great Spanish. Do you want to do this interview in Spanish?
I'm actually kind of still learning a little bit. Again, growing up in Orange County, it was definitely a part of my culture, but it definitely, I want to be more fluent. It's definitely a resolution of mine, so I've been trying to, so un poco.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, it's fine. It's fine. Don't worry. I will not put you to sweat on that. It's fine. Well, no. Well, that's fine. Well, like you've heard, Alec is from Orange County. He's from California, and he's from there right now talking to us. And we're going to talk about his career, his goals right now as the assistant coach, but also what he did for soccer. So Sundley, is not just a former professional soccer player with an impressive 7-year career, but he has also proven to be a stellar coach as well, with recent roles as an assistant coach, like we mentioned, and also for the UC Davis men's soccer team. Sundley has contributed significantly to the team's success, securing 2 Big West tournament berths and leading them to a semifinals appearance in 2021. So this is an honor right now to have this interview with Alec. Alec, I would like to begin by asking you, well, obviously, first of all, about your background. Tell us a little bit more about yourself. How old are you? How did you start into this sport? How has your journey been with soccer so far?
Yeah, right on. So like David said, from Orange County, grew up playing what was kind of that whole DA process, which, as you can see, the youth culture use kind of infrastructure has changed a lot. So it is kind of crazy to think that what kids are going through now was very different from yourself for a lot of the listeners. So grew up down there, played for Irvine Strikers, was really, really lucky to have not only great coaching staffs, but players alongside me that got to play eventually Division I, Division II, ex-pro. So I was, from a very young age, I was in a very healthy and competitive environment. So I think that really helped me, but grew up playing a lot of multiple sports. I think that's kind of an American thing, but definitely something that I think actually helped myself, playing baseball, a little bit of basketball, but found the love for soccer at a very, very young age. I think I started when I was about 5 or 6. And my whole family just absolutely loved it. And so played since I was 6, got obviously into the competitive environment around, I think, about 15, where, it was that conversation from your parents. Hey, look, I think you got something here, especially with, college possibly in the horizon. Kind of really dove into it and was lucky enough to get recruited, played my college ball at the University of California, Berkeley for 3-4 seasons, got drafted, and then had some, career stint here in the States, got to play abroad, and then kind of jumped into the coaching world. So it's been a journey of, domestic, international, here, coaching, playing, but just really, really, lucky to be where I'm at today. So again, thank you for having me.
Man, that's lovely to hear. And well, the reason why we have you also is because you have a connection with us, especially with Jose Agustin Talero, which he is our founder, and he is the one in charge and like the mind behind what La Zona is today. So you guys met at the Venture Combine, right? The Ventura Combine, which
Correct.
is one of the biggest ones in the nation. Tell us a little bit more about this combine, what a combine is. Maybe some of the listeners here do not know what a combine is, what it was like for you, and obviously if you'd like to discuss the level that you saw in Jose at that time.
Yeah. So Toledo is a great friend of mine. So again, it's been really cool to kind of see him grow into this new space. So the Ventura Fusion Combine, for those who may or may not know, is a very renowned, well-ran showcase for pros, ex-pros that maybe are looking for either new contracts or looking for a new environment, or just a lot of the young, aspiring kids that maybe didn't get a look at the higher level, say MLS, USL, that are just given the opportunity to showcase themselves. And I think, as we all know, especially here in America, there's just so many great players that just kind of get unseen. There's only such limited amount of opportunities to really get in front and play games at a high level. And so, again, we got picked. Jose and I were on the same team. And in my opinion, we absolutely ran through all the other teams. I thought we had such a great vibe. The types of players that we had, all possession-oriented, high-level types of players, ex-pros, young. But I think what was really neat was just kind of the vibe that I think Toledo kind of ran, was like, hey, look, let's be special. Let's do something special. And I think we all just kind of bought in. And I mean, we were playing such a awesome brand. I think I actually still have the video of all of us in the couple of games. And you watch it, it was as if we were a trained team. We trained for weeks and we had structure, we had organization, but it was just beautiful football, and it was really, really neat. So, I think when I first met, Toledo, and to see where he's at today, it doesn't surprise me that, he loves the game. He loved just knowledge. And over the past couple of years, he's even just shot me a couple of like, hey, if you don't mind trying this training out, let me know your thoughts. Like, what are your thoughts on, just in general? So, to see where he's at today, it is really special. I mean, he's one of the hardest working people I know. But like you said, he loves it. He loves to learn. And I think the environment, the community he's creating is really, really cool.
Man, that's awesome. And well, it's interesting because it's the first time that we actually talk about Toledo in the show, in the podcast. We've had different episodes here in Spanish, obviously, but this is the first time we talk about him, his capacity, and like you said, that drive he has to learn all the time, and that intensity, if you may call it like that he portrays with the sport, especially. Well, I'd like to go back to your answer about the combine and just hear a little bit more now on the perspective as a coach today. How are combines important for players, and how would you prepare yourself for a combine?
Yeah, I think every coach understands combines are not easy. It's an environment you're put into that you basically have, whether it's 70 minutes, 45 minutes, 90 minutes, to really showcase what you can offer as a player in that short amount of time. That I think, yes, if you have a goal, you have a dream, you want to, say, become a professional player in any capacity, you're going to be forced to put into these types of environments. And I think what these combines do, and yes, there's a lot of them, some have loads of success, some don't, but regardless, at the end of the day, you just have to put yourself out there enough to really demand and try to get in front of the right eyes. And I think the greatest lesson I learned even abroad was, you're just one moment away from your life changing. It could be just that one coach, that one scout that sees something and you get your opportunity, and then your whole life can change. And so I think, these combines, if that is something you want or you're trying to achieve, they definitely are. It's an opportunity like anything, right? So that's where I think they're essential. And again, there's different ways of doing it, but I think especially for that one, the Ventura one in particularly, they've had loads of success where players get picked up. And like I said earlier, there's only so many eyes as scouts, and there's so many players. And that's what I think these opportunities are just, what do you have to lose?
Yeah, it's true. I know I heard maybe like 2 weeks ago on an Instagram video that they were talking about how important combines or tryouts are also to do networking, because it's not only the coaches that you're showing off to, but it's also maybe your peers that they may have had the chance to showcase somewhere else. And I don't know, they could turn into friends, and one day they are the assistant coach for Cal University, and you never know, you might have open doors to somewhere else where it might not be for that team, but it could be for somewhere else. What do you think about that?
Yeah, no doubt. And I think that's what, in my opinion, is really special about the soccer community. It's so tight. I mean, again, I can imagine we all speak about maybe 1, 2, 3, 4 players. You're like, oh yeah, I know his brother. I know his coach. Oh yeah, his former coach used to be with mine. So I think that is what's really special too. And that's why I think I love the game so much. It truly is a small, tight community that we all want to help each other out. And like I said, dude, you're one phone call, one moment away from literally everything changing.
Exactly, man. And, well, there was something also that you said, which I'd like to go back to, which was the possibilities that we have in the sport to be seen. And it's not only in the United States where there's a ton of talent that it's not being seen, or that they do not make it to the professional teams. Well, we are in La Zona, and that's something that we talked about also in other episodes. If you have the chance to listen to this podcast, once again, we'll try to make every episode also bilingual. We could put the subtitles for the ones that are in Spanish, which have great content. And in one of those podcasts, we were talking about exactly how we are trying to be more objective with the information we're giving to coaches who are watching us in tryouts. So by doing so, we have technologies that are measuring our performance, and what we give to our players. I'm talking about our company, La Zona. What we give to our players is, look, you have this in a way, let's call it a report card, where it shows your performance in what your basic skills are, your technical skills are, your cognitive skills. And this is, let's call it a report card, because that's the only word that comes up to me right now, where you show the coach this information. You tell him, look, this is my data. I have some stats behind this. Do you think right now, and going maybe into a question which might be a little bit harder, do you think right now that technology could be able to do that, could help the selection process?
No doubt. I mean, again, I think what was an interesting article that I read was, look at what Kevin De Bruyne's doing, and that he's actually using his statistics and analytical data to leverage his conversations about how much he's truly worth. So I think, to answer your question, absolutely. And I think what's special about today's modern day football is that you have access to this stuff, where before, I mean, you were asking your mom and your dad or your sister, like, hey, can you camcord and just try to keep it steady? Don't, I'm right. You know what I'm saying? Or now you got all these GPS units, VO, Trace, all these ones that I think, why not? Because again, it is just now with the access to email and video sources, especially as a young player, I think your outreach has multiplied significantly. And so I think, why not open up that branch? And I think even as a college coach, I mean, we're getting influx with emails, which I think is great, because now at least you're seeing that these kids in particularly are given more of an opportunity because of video and all these technological advances. And especially when it comes to data, I think at the higher levels that you get, all those cognitive decision making, physical speed attributes, they all matter. They all matter. And so to have that, I think, is actually extremely beneficial.
Yeah. Well, you talked a little bit about coaching, so let's get into that. How was that transition? What motivated you to step into the coaching role?
Yeah. So I think as a player, I was obsessed with analyzing video, whether it was myself, the team, and just, I mean, again, I'm a football junkie in that space. I mean, I was watching Prem games 6 a.m. as a young kid. Like, I was always fascinated on just watching the game and just seeing what players were doing. And I think you and I are extremely lucky to grow up in an age of not only amazing players, but amazing managers. I mean, to see the development, to see Sir Alex Ferguson, Arsene Wenger, to now see Jurgen Klopp, Mikel Arteta, you go along the whole list. And especially even on the women's side, Emma Hayes, Vlatko, like all these unbelievable coaches, right? That we get to see. And also too, the game is evolving. I think we're in such a unique phase of football right now that the game is changing. It's in this evolution phase where, 2-3 years, it was an inverted fullback. All of a sudden now you're seeing, is it the three, like you're just starting to see the game change. And so for me as a player, I noticed I was obsessed with it. And so eventually once I was done playing, it was something for me that I always wanted to explore. And so when I got the opportunity fairly quickly after I played, I became a volunteer coach. It was like, yeah, this is where I want to be. And again, I think the hardest challenge that I had was I see it, but they don't. And so how do you find ways to not only help the player out, but then from the other side, it's just now kind of changing the hat. And so I think for me, it's been still a challenge I'm still working on, but definitely one that, it's exciting.
Yeah, that's awesome. Exactly. You have to see things from another perspective, and that's what I'd like to go into right now. I'm also a coach here, obviously not at the same level that you are. I'm coaching right now U8s and U9s, which it's challenging.
Bless your heart, by the way. That is difficult.
It is. Go on, it's hard. You have to have a lot of patience, but you also have to just, in a way, dumb things down. Say things in a much more simpler way. For you, it's so easy to say, okay, just pass the ball, but then you have to actually go through it. How do you pass the ball? You got to lock your ankle. You got to do all these steps, little steps that contribute into their performance and to getting better to it. So, how would you describe that change of perspective from being a player, even though you're still a player? Obviously, you still play probably on your free time, but when you refer to your players or you need to explain something to them, how has your perspective changed from a player to a coach?
Yeah, I think every coach has had to deal with this one, right? And I think what is challenging for us as coaches is how to find ways to connect. And so it's like, okay, and again, this is where I think the best coaches are, in my opinion, are the ones that are in it almost the longest, who are consistently doing it because they've just trial and error. They figured, I tried it this way, didn't work. Okay, we pivot, we move on. I think that's what's been the biggest hurdle, right? Especially with this kind of newer age of kid where, where maybe in the past we had to start down here, where these kids now, because they're watching football more, access to games, it's now their foundation's higher. So it's now, how do you find ways to kind of bridge that gap of, okay, here's what we're dealing with now, and how do we connect with that group, but now elevate them to 5% versus before, right? It was a little bit easier. Okay, you can dumb it down. We're now. So I think the whole perspective change is still something I'm working through. Do I have the answer? Absolutely not. Even the best coaches that I've had are still trying to figure it out. And I think that's where being willing to ask questions, even to them, and having them kind of speak their mind too, has been actually what I've noticed has helped a lot. It's just, you really ask the questions why, and then to have them speak on it as well.
Yeah, no, for sure. I feel you. And there's one point which really stands out from a coaching point of view, which is you always remember, or well, not all your coaches, but there is one coach in particular that you probably have in mind, because coaches they turn to be a huge aspect of players' lives, of athletes' lives. And I believe that, at least for me, in my case, I have a coach in my mind that even though I try to have my own philosophy and my own impact in the game of my team, there is something about a coach and that role that we play as a coach, which is very mind driven in how their mindset has to be. Do you have any coach in particular that you remember and that you're like, man, this philosophy that I learned from him or her is so important to me that I need to, in a way, relay this to my team?
For sure. And I can even go back when I first started playing the game. at like U6, and it was my dad, and then into eventually my first real competitive coach, and then my college coach. And I think what's needed, we all have stories, and I think every team, every coach that's a piece of you. And I think that's what's unique is, eventually whatever level you end up coaching, it's the accumulation of everything that you've been exposed to. And obviously then you start adding your flavor that then becomes your brand. Right. And I think that's where, for myself, very fortunate, had some amazing coaches, great people still that I connect with. That again, is it my philosophy? Probably not. It's been accumulation of I like this, I didn't like that. That again, is it mine? Sure, but not really. But I think that's what's really cool about the coaching world is you see so many little different flavors, and we all can go back and talk about it, say, oh yeah, I use that. I mean, still to this day, very fortunate in the space that I'm in. I get to work with a lot of great college coaches who've been in the game for 25 seasons, 35 seasons.
Wow. And
just to even hear just a couple of little things that I get to see them coach, just one little word. And I'm like, oh, I love that. Never thought about it, and then all of a sudden you start implementing that. So I think that's what's so great about this space, especially the coaching world, is at the end of the day, we're all trying to achieve the same thing. We want to be the best coaches, but again, creating the best environment for our players. And hopefully, if a couple of your players get to play at the next level, great. But I think the greatest win is you get that phone call 15 years from now and be like, hey, look, I still remember how you treated me, how, those couple of sessions out, you were hard on me, and those words that kind of stuck. And I think that's the whole point.
Yeah, no, I'm sure that you already probably have players that you can look up to, or that you can see right now that have made it maybe to a pro team or something, and it's rewarding. Do you have any players like that right now?
Yeah, so I mean, the greatest example is that we had when I was at Davis, I had the opportunity to coach Max Arfston for a brief stint. Unbelievable player, but he actually now just won the MLS Cup with the Columbus Crew, and so to kind of still keep in touch with him and just hear kind of his side of it, right? And I mean, I still remember the conversations of him coming into the office, us watching video. I was like, so what do you want out of this, dude? Like, what do you truly want? Like, dude, I want to play at the next level. I want to do it. And I'm like, okay, well, let's get it on. And so that's just one example, right? And again, too, been really lucky playing for Cal. We've had numerous pros that just recently retired. But again, I remember my freshman year, for example, in 2010, we had an unbelievable team. 7 of our seniors got all drafted that were playing in the league, playing high level, getting call-ups to the national team. And even one of the captains that I currently still keep in touch with every once in a while, but we captain the team together. Steven Birnbaum is now 12 years in the MLS, captaining the DC United squad, center back, getting some national team call-ups. And so it's kind of those kind of moments that you're like, damn, this is really, really cool.
Man, that's awesome. And well, referring back to what we were just talking about, how soccer shapes also a player's life, and not only a player's life, but also a person's life, because in the end, they get to in a way translate what they learned, all the values they learned in the sport, to their own lives. There is one book, I don't know if you've read, called Soccer IQ by Dan Blank. Have you read that book?
So I haven't got into it, but I know it's on my list, and I've heard a lot of former coaches.
Yes.
Absolutely dig into that book.
Well, I'll do that shout out for that book, because honestly, it changed the way that I see the sport to this day, even from a coaching perspective, obviously, but also from a player perspective, because I also play still, and this book is it's really easy to read, and it just brings small tips on how the sport is. Like, it's so easy, it's so simple, but what's hard of it is to play simple, like Johan Cruyff would say. But yeah, that mentality it's huge, but it's amazing. I recommend that book for you and for all the listeners that that they're connected today to this podcast, because it's one good book. You'll get, oh my God, you have so many tools, so many good advices for your players and for yourself. But yeah, well, now I know I want to respect your time and the time of our listeners. We're going to have to ask that one question we ask in all our podcasts. Even if it's in English, we got to ask it too. Well, la zona, for those of you who don't speak Spanish, means it's the zone, right? It's really simple. La zona, the zone, which stands or which it represents that flow state, where it's that space between time and the space that you are, the physical space that you are, where everything just flows. Is that flow state that we've heard the Black Mamba talk about? We've heard so many athletes talk about this space. Well, what about Alex Sundley? What do you think about what flow state is and how it helps players or athletes to improve their performance?
Yeah, so the zone for me is addicting. It's the space as a player we all strive to be in. And even as coaches, I think you, myself, as players have gone through it, but even as coaches where you were just so in it. And then all of a sudden, once it does stop, you kind of take a step back and say, did that actually just happen? Right? So I think for me, it is an addicting feeling. And I think that obsession is huge. And so for me, the zone is where hard work and preparation meet. And so at that point, you're so prepared and you've put in the work that all of a sudden you don't think, you just do. And so for me, the zone is, as a coach, as a player, as a parent, anything, it's that kind of point where they meet that I truly feel is when you are your best self. And so for me, it's the ideal state. I think reaching that, especially as a player or a coach, is something we all strive for. But it does take hard work and a lot of preparation.
Man, I love that. It is quite addictive, and that's the first time I've heard anyone refer to it as that. And that's why it's so nice to ask that same question, because we've asked that same question to every single one of our guests on the show, and the answers that we get are always different. They're always unique. So cool. They're always genuine, and it's so nice. It's so nice to put another word to what this represents. It represents not just like a state where the soccer player can improve, but also the human being as well. Like you said, it's the ideal state to be at. And well, as a coach, and this would be, I think, my final question, how would you help the players tap into that flow state, if there's any way to do that?
Yeah, I think the greatest tool that helped me, not only as a player, but also as a coach, was getting into meditation. Because I think the moment we can truly understand how the mind works, the idea of letting go of a thought, that all of a sudden, you can better understand yourself. And I think once you've mastered your mind, then everything is secondary, because now you've truly understood what it takes to calm yourself down in a tough moment. Buzzwords. And I think that's the biggest thing I learned with meditation is, okay, in these moments, how do I feel? And actually taking that moment. I think you've read it. I think you definitely, both you and Toledo, know your stuff when it comes to every high caliber athlete. I think they've all discussed meditation of some sort of form. It's maybe not just sitting on a cushion 10 minutes and doing it, but it's you just maybe shooting free throws and not thinking. That in itself is a meditation. Getting outside and juggling is some form of meditation, because you're not thinking, but you're just doing, you're feeling. How does this feel? What am I actually doing? And so I think for myself and kind of anyone, I think the meditation piece is actually been really the big turning point for myself. And I tell a lot of even my young players, I'm not saying go meditate every day, but I want you to really take time to think about what you're doing, how you feel, what is that emotion, and actually discuss it, and know that it's okay, that it's not perfect. It's okay. You're going to feel frustrated. It's okay to be upset. It's okay to feel good and happy, but knowing that, okay, how do we find ways to just work through that one step at a time?
Well, That's Alex Sundley. He is the assistant coach of Cal University, former professional soccer player. He has a beautiful story. And, well, I don't want to let you go without asking you right now, what's coming up for you? What are you looking forward to on this 2024? And if you could, if that's a phrase from my dad, is you have to have your north clear. You have to know where you're going. Where is Alex Sundley going?
For sure. I think as any college coach, you're always looking for this new spring semester to really start building the team to win a national title. So for us, the number one goal as a coaching staff for myself is preparing our players to get a national title.
That's awesome. Well, there you go. There you have it. Alex Sundley, thank you so much for being with us today in La ZONA Podcast.
Thank you so much.
Nos vemos en el próximo episodio, donde seguiremos inspirándote a alcanzar nuevas profundidades. La ZONA Podcast.